Welcome to Big Brave Business. This is the podcast where we answer big questions, reshaping entrepreneurship. I'm Sarah K. Heater, and this is Season 3. Each week, I'm bringing on my friends, mentors, and some of the best thought leaders I know. We dive into bold, values-driven conversations about leadership, equity, ethics, and building businesses that actually make a difference. Ready to do business better? Let's dive in. Welcome back to Big Brave Business Season 3. I am so pumped for this season. I have been doing so much planning and so much preparation and so much networking for who's coming on, what conversations are we having, what are the different topics. I've gotten so much interest, especially from threads, which is crazy, of people expressing that they want to be part of this. And when they see the conversations that we have scheduled, the feedback has been tremendously good. So this is going to be good. Today, I am here with 4 of my awesome, incredible friends, and we're going to be talking about some branding stuff. This is candidly the first time we've ever recorded one of these conversations in this way. So we're figuring it out together. But we're going to start with some introductions. We decided that it would be a lot if I just told you 5 people's bios on the beginning of this episode. So instead, we're just going to do a quick intro to who are the voices that you're hearing. And then if you want to read more about us, which you totally should, because we are great, we are awesome, and we all share the same, or not the same core values, but we have compatible core values. So of course we want to know you and we want to know each other and we want to hang out. So go learn more about each of us in the description of the episode. And you can also get our links to connect with each of us there. But I'm the host of this podcast. If you're new here, welcome. Thank you for being here. My name is Sarah Heater and I am a podcast producer and strategic consultant.
Hey, I'm Siobhan Strode. I am a values-obsessed mentor for change makers.
Ooh, I like it.
I'm Jackie Hayes. I'm a client experience strategist and a systems nerd.
I'm Erica Stanley. I'm a branding, website, and AI strategist.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mayra, and I'm a Latina launch and sales copywriter for purpose-driven business owners.
Thank you so much for being here. This is so fun. So the big question today is, what does it mean to create a brand that stands for something, and why does it matter?
I was teaching a workshop on this afternoon, and I feel like it was
perfect.
amazing timing of this recording, but the podcast, it's just really weird timing. So we had a really good discussion in the podcast the workshop about why do values matter, and we looked at some data, and people are so much more savvy now, and they're sussing out how they want to buy, and they're much more particular about who they're buying from. So I think values really do matter now. You have to stand out that way. People are so much more aware of things, and they're very suspicious of pinkwashing and greenwashing and stuff. So I think it's really important for all brands.
Yeah, I agree. I think that consumers are more savvy. Like you said, the studies show that consumers want to put their dollars behind brands that align with their values. And we are becoming more aware. We can smell it a mile away, right? We know the pinkwashing and the greenwashing and the bullshit. We can smell it. Our clients can smell it. And so it's becoming more important than ever for brands to not just have their values on their website, but to actually make it a part of who they are and what they're doing, who they're hiring, what they're saying online. It's becoming a integral part of every piece of your brand.
I think it's really interesting that we're having this conversation today at the end of February of 2025, when Friday is going to be this don't buy anything day boycott, where people are saying, you have made some choices that I can't condone, I don't align with because of DEI, rollbacks, etc. And I'm really curious what that impact is going to be like, how businesses are going to respond to this, because people are saying, I don't want to give you my money if you don't align with my values. It's harder and harder to do that, but that's what people want.
And I love that you brought that up, Jackie, because I feel like it goes back to that second part of the question of why does it matter? It matters because people want to know, where is my money going to? I want to make sure that I align with the values of this business owner if I'm going to be giving my hard-earned dollars to this person.
Well, and that's interesting because to me, what immediately came to mind is all of the discussion about Doge. And this is US specific. So I don't know what the news looks like outside of the US. I don't know. You might know better than we do, actually, at this point, what's actually happening in our own country, Siobhan. But what it makes me think of, Mayra, is that people want to know where their money's going, you said. And I think this is true no matter what your core values are. People want to feel like they know where their money's going. And that's why Doge even exists, because they're able to capitalize on people's desire to know where their money's going. Even if I'm going to make an assumption that the people on this call, because I feel like I know at least the Americans well enough to know, and also probably most people who listen to this, like, aren't necessarily in support of how this is happening in the US, but it's capitalizing on that desire of like, I need to know where my money's going and what is it supporting and what is it funding and does it align with my values?
Agreed. And I think going to full circle, why we are all very intentional about what we post, how we post, because we want the people who are going to align with us to be part of our network.
And it's interesting too, because I just used like a government example, but I think about corporations. Jackie, you were talking about the buy nothing day. With corporations, I think I'm going to just use the word easier for me to not think about a core values match when it comes to like large corporations, because it's just so integrated into life. Like, I have an iPhone. I don't think about whether or not I want to support Apple. Like, that's really not part of my buying decision, right? I drive a Honda. I don't really think about the core values of Honda. I just like the car. But with personal brands, with small businesses, that's where I feel like it matters like 100-fold more importantly. When I used to work for a real estate consulting company, and so I knew a lot of real estate agents, or I know, I still know them, a lot of real estate agents. And I remember when Trump ran the first time, that there were agents who were very outspoken politically, and there were also agents who would question, like, that's so unprofessional. Don't put your political opinions into your real estate profiles. Like, why would you do this? And I remember thinking, like, listen, I live in Phoenix. There are more real estate agents per square mile in Phoenix than anywhere else in the country. And yes, we have a ton of real estate agents here. So you could sneeze onto a real estate agent, right? And if that's the case, then I have to make a decision of what real estate agent I'm going to work with somehow. And I would so much rather ensure that the person who's getting paid on my deal is somebody who I align with from a core values perspective than someone I don't. So I'm going to think about that. So, and if the person doesn't speak up when there's something happening that I care a lot about, that actually sends me a pretty clear message when somebody else is willing to.
Well, and I think to that example, knowing that you are in alignment with a person who is shepherding you through this giant purchase and what turns into, buying a home is a whole thing. Is that person that you are working with taking you to neighborhoods where the values are going to be aligned? Or, there's so much nuance in that. Working with a mortgage lender who stands up for equal lending practices. There's a lot of different reasons to work with small businesses who are aligned with your values. And gosh, that real estate example is so good, because there's so many teeny little facets where you want to be happy where you live. And so I know my neighborhood is super diverse and I can imagine if I had worked with a real estate agent that would maybe even just write off my neighborhood as like, it's transitional. You don't want to live there. Wouldn't have even shown me the house. So
transitional is a nice word for what someone might say to describe a diverse neighborhood. But yeah, I hear you.
Coming back to what Sarah said, and several have said about you don't think about Honda and their values, etc. When the corporations are so large and you don't have a personal relationship with the CEO, it's kind of easier to forget about that, I think, than when you're working with a single person or their small team and you have a personal relationship with them. And I know that if I'm working with a small business owner, so a real estate agent or a copywriter, whatever it happens to be, I'm giving them my money. And that means they're going to give their money to somebody eventually. And if I give it to somebody who doesn't align with my values, that means they're going to give their money to someone who doesn't align with my values. And it becomes a trickle down effect. So the more I give to people who align with me, the more other people who align with me are going to thrive in this economy.
That's what makes me so sad about what's going on, about Target's decision to walk back DEI, because as a brand, they have for so long, they have seemed, at least on the surface, very committed to supporting Black-owned businesses and small businesses on their shelves. And I don't understand the decision. And the proof is in the numbers, right? Their stocks have gone down. They have lost $15 billion in revenue since they made this decision. So I wonder how long.
And that's as of the end of February. So like the decision was just recently made, because this
Oh,
will
yeah.
air until I think like the end of April. So it will be a lot more money by then.
Yes. Yeah. So stock prices, revenue, it is impacting them negatively. But I mean, those are just numbers in an article. How is it impacting the small business owners who had now built up teams because, oh my gosh, now I'm being carried in a Target. And now Target is no longer prioritizing those purchases. So that trickles down. Like those decisions, we think that there's some like faceless corporation, but I don't know. It's going to have impacts that we don't even think about, I think, at this point.
Well, I think it's really interesting because I don't think the corporations, I think they think they're safe from this. Like, they're like, we're so powerful, we've got so much cash, we're going to be fine. But actually, the numbers are really starting to show Starbucks have had a real impact from the boycott movement. There's like branches shutting down in the UK, there's branches shutting down across kind of UAE and in Egypt. And it's the same with like McDonald's as well in certain countries. I think Malaysia has had a huge impact because people are boycotting because of Israel-Palestine conflict, the genocide. But yeah, so like, I don't think until like the last 18 months, companies realize like actually there's a lot of buyer power and the boycott movement is growing. Friday is happening. And I think it's interesting because for me, that movement is linked to BDS, like the boycott divestment movement. But it's really interesting hearing you speak as a part of like a kind of anti-Doge, anti-Trump thing as well. Like I hadn't really thought about it from that perspective. And I think companies are going to be in for a bit of a shock. Like people not buying fuel, people not buying food, people not using their credit cards, people just trying to stay at home as much as they can. And obviously not everyone can do that because that's a privilege, right? Like not going to work, that's a privilege. Self-employed people can be like, fuck yeah, I'm turning my laptop off today. But like, again, that's a privilege. Like I'm paying for childcare on Friday. It's a working day. Like I kind of have to work. Yeah. So I don't know. I just think it's really fascinating.
I think that a lot about privilege and accessibility, because I think people are quick to talk about with boycotting and divesting of things that make accessibility possible. So I think like Walmart's whole premise is making a certain like basic comfort lifestyle accessible, and people deserve to have access to those things. So kind of making the choice not to shop there is great if you can, but I also think there's no shame in not participating in a boycott from me personally. Like I just think that kind of writes off accessibility, number one, for what shopping's available in your area, because big box stores chase out a lot of smaller companies. But number two, price points. I mean, I think about like one of my biggest passion points for several years now is, so I don't know if you have them. I'm assuming it's worldwide, but so we have a dollar store called the Dollar Tree, and they a few years ago raised their prices from everything in the store was $1. They did a company-wide increase to $1.25. So that's literally a 25% increase, which to me feels crazy on the entire store. And now, granted, the stuff that they had that they were selling for $1 couldn't possibly be ethically sourced. However, it makes being in poverty really expensive if everything that you count on just went up 25%, right? So, and also I hate that they're still like branded as the Dollar Tree and their like logo is a 1, because I'm like, it should be a 125, but regardless. So I'm curious though, when it comes to, like, we've talked a lot about core values. So I'm curious, like, in your own businesses and your own work life, like, especially if you had 9 to 5s before this, I'm curious, do you have core values outlined for your own business? Are they on your website? Did you have core values in, if you had a like corporate job in the past, like, did you have core values as part of, and like, how does that show up in the culture besides just being listed on the website?
That's a great question, Sarah. And I feel like I can speak on that on every angle that you just said, because before I was a copywriter, I was an elementary teacher and I taught first grade for 8 years. So I knew nothing about marketing. My brain was just like all in teaching mode. But I knew that even back then, I did it because I wanted to create impact. I wanted to create a positive change with the younger generation. Obviously, like life happens, you grow, you evolve, you want to try new things. I transitioned to a copywriter, but I still wanted to have my values around that I wanted to create impact. I wanted to influence in a positive way, but through words. So it was just a matter of putting all of those feelings into 3 distinct words. So after a lot of reflection, I thought, okay, well, for me, what aligns with Cultural Visionaries, which is my copy business, is authenticity, influence, and meaningful work. And it's not, as you said, how do you showcase that through not just like a stamp on your website, but I try my best to showcase it with every client that I work with. So making sure that their values are aligned with me. We may not have the same values, but they are similar. They are trying to help somebody else with whatever they're running, whether it's a consulting business, coaching, to make their lives better. And then when we get on our calls, I really do my best to stand back and just listen to them, because like, if I'm doing all the talking, I'm not going to get those deep, juicy nuggets I need to write copy for them. So I let them speak and I'll ask maybe some follow-up questions to get deeper insight. But it's always coming from a place of care and nurturing. I think just also for me being a teacher in the past. And I do feel that that shows, because every time we complete a project together, when they give me a testimonial, whatever the numbers were are great, but more importantly, they always go back to how I made them feel. Like, you made me feel heard. I felt seen by you. And now I feel like this copy is going to do the same for my community. So long story short, that's how I feel it all come full circle.
Okay, I have a follow-up question for you specifically, and I do want to hear from the rest of you. So as a copywriter, you're writing or supporting the copy for other brands, so they have their own core values. So how do you ensure in the way, because I do this too, right? I'm a podcast producer, so I work with other clients. I'm amplifying their, but in your client relationships, how do you ensure that you're not just focused on your own core values, but also on their core values?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And so when I say my values and theirs, that's just step one. Like, do we have similar values that align where we can work together? Because thinking about the previous question about where our money goes to, I want that to be the same agreement on both ends. And then once we are working together, then that's when I'm like, okay, well, we kind of set the stage on both of our values. Now I'm just going to be listening to them and their values, because I'm writing as if I'm them. So when I'm asking them a brand questionnaire, it does start with like, what are like 3 to 5 words to describe your brand? And they can tell me, but then I'm like, well, that's great and all in my head, but I need more juice than that. So I will, going back to my teaching moment, to say, I love that you mentioned this. I wonder what you meant by whatever word they said. Like, can you give me an experience that made you think of that word? And then that gives them that running to go more in depth. And then I can take those words and put it seamlessly into their copy, whether it be for like their website or their emails, but it's coming from them. And I feel confident that it sounds like them because I'm using my Fathom AI note taker in the background, and it records everything they say in a template structure so that I have those words. And then I just use my as you say, copy magic, the strategy to make those words in a way that takes a person down the funnel.
Okay, going back to what are your do you have core values outlined in your businesses, and how do they show up in your business? And then also, if you had like a 9 to 5 before this, did you have core values outlined in that job? And if so, did you feel like they showed up in your work?
So I had a few marketing or ad agency jobs before I went off on my own. I worked marketing at some in-house companies. And the last agency I worked at before I started my business, we had core values painted on the wall, mural style, in our big open area. And it it did feel like they were important to the business. We were given time off each week to volunteer at lunchtime. We had a lot of different initiatives within that business that upheld those core values. It is something that I wanted to make sure that I put into my business when I started, was to make sure that those values weren't just painted on the wall. And so I have tried to and I try to do this not just for myself, but I do this for my clients when I'm working on a branding or a website project, is that I make sure that the values that really mean a lot to me or to a client, they are woven into the wording on the website, not just the obvious words, but the word choices that we make, that they are woven into the visuals that we choose, that we're being intentional with stock photography, or if we're not doing stock photography and we're taking brand photos, that we're making sure that the color choice, the settings, the people in the background, that they are speaking to those brand values. There's so many little subtle things that go into a brand that if you're really looking for it, people notice. And it all paints a picture of what this brand stands for. My parents, bless their hearts, in Georgia, my parents are on the fairly conservative end of the spectrum. And my husband is African American. And they're conservative, but they're moderate. I don't know. Hi, mom and dad, if you're listening to this, I love you. And I don't judge you, and I love you. Anyway, I remember sitting and watching TV with them. And this has just been in the past few years. And there was a biracial couple on a commercial. And my conservative father was like, I'm really glad that we have seen a progression in more inclusivity in commercials. I don't think he used the word inclusivity, but that's basically what he was saying. And it felt so cool in that moment for me to hear someone who does not align with my values on a lot of things, to recognize the importance of visibility and inclusion in something as simple as a Cheerios commercial.
I really hope we keep seeing that in commercials with all of the pulling back on DEI efforts, because I actually totally agree. And Cheerios specifically has had some really good representation in commercials. So it's funny that you said that, but I can specifically think of Cheerios commercials, which is wild. And I think that's really the power of like branding that's mission driven and core values led, because it sticks in your mind, right? How many commercials have we seen that? We
Yep.
don't remember, but that I did
And
specifically.
And
I
we all
thought the
think of
same thing.
Cheerios.
Yeah. And I thought the same thing of like, I love seeing this. It's what the world looks like. And I think we've made so much progress moving away from media that doesn't look like the world looks, which reinforces, I think, some really like heinous negative things, like what a not aligned real estate agent might say about your neighborhood, Erica, but regardless. So, okay, so I'm curious. So, if you do have core values outlined in your business, what is the number one, like, most important core value in your business, and why is it the most important to you? And I want to go first. So I have 5 outlined for Podfox, and I structured them in a way that wasn't just like, to your point, Myra, when you said, I asked them like 5 words to describe your business. And I'm like, okay, but what do you mean by that? So instead of like, one of my core values is DEI, I worded things in a way that explains, what do you mean by that? So the 5 that I have, just to go through them really quickly, are: we're better together, we like good trouble, we believe our voices matter, we get massive results, and we have big fun. And then I do have like an explanation for those 5 things, which I'm not going to spend a ton of time on. But if I had to pick one that I would say is like the most important, which is hard because they're all important, I would say it is: we believe our voices matter. And the description I have for that is: we empower, encourage, and support each other and enthusiastically add value to the community. And I think that I can pick that as my top one because it kind of encompasses the other things. And literally, the mission statement for Podfox, for my company, is your voice matters. So I think that we believe our voices matter would be like my top one. And the way that I try to make sure that that's like integrated into my business is much like you said, Myra, which is about, how do I make people feel? So that empowering, encouraging, and supporting each other and enthusiastically adding value, that's how I want people to feel when they interact with me or my brand, especially my clients. But I'm curious about the rest of you. What's your number one core value?
So my number one core value in my business and in my personal life is curiosity. Anybody who actually knows me is not probably surprised by that. I'm a big what if person. But curiosity is more than just asking the what ifs. For me, it also means being curious about the experience of other human beings. And so that for me goes not just in business, but throughout their entire lives, because everything that they experience in their life is going to impact how I work with them, how I interact with them. And then what I produce for them is going to help them do better, make an impact as well. So knowing them personally, knowing how they think, knowing what the experiences they've had is part of that curiosity. And so that's one of the reasons it's my number one core value.
That was really lovely to listen to, Jackie. Listening to all of you, Myra, we've got quite a similar background. I was a teacher for 12 years, in early years specifically. And I think a lot of so social justice has been a thread throughout my life. And I think that was really why I went into teaching, was to make a difference with young children and to kind of give them a really positive start in life. And then when I left after a breakdown, which I'm pretty sure is how every other teacher has left teaching, I also went into like the word business, and I was a word witch for quite a long time. And I'm currently in the process of a rebrand / pivot, and really leaning into kind of my leadership skills and my using, because I was saying earlier, I wear lots of different hats. And so I stood for Parliament in 2019, which is like running for office in the US. It's for like the highest level of Parliament. Parliament is the highest level of office in the UK, and lost the election. But I ran like a really good campaign, and really clean, really ethical, really positive, and I was the only woman standing out of the 5 people, and received a lot of misogynistic abuse and trolling and all that kind of jazz. But what I'm trying to get to eventually in my ADHD way is explaining, like, so I wasn't telling people in my business. So I was running a business simultaneously, like copywriting, but I was kind of keeping all of this separate and running my business as like a professional, because in teaching I had to be professional. So I felt like I had to be professional all the time, that stupid word. And there was such a huge shift in my business when I started talking about my politics and talking about what I was doing outside of work, raising boys as feminists, doing things in my local community as a counsellor with a C, not an S. And then running for office. People were like, oh my God, I had no idea you were doing any of these things. I had no idea that's what you stood for, because I had this kind of like vague brand, like, because I was so worried about like offending people and not getting in the right clients. But actually, like, when I look back at my clients in kind of 2018, they were diabolical. Like, I was biting my tongue on calls with clients because they'd suddenly, like, I don't know, we'd be talking about the blog I was writing for them that month and what copy I was going to add to their services page or whatever. And they'd suddenly like start talking about immigration. And I'd be like, oh my God, like, I can't say anything because you're paying me. Whereas, like, as soon as I started talking about the fact that I fucking hate the Tories, which is like Republicans, but like posh wankers, basically. Like, as soon as I started like talking about that, and I started doing like creating content about fuck the Tories, anti-Tory grammar lessons, basically, was what this kind of content I created that kind of went viral. It started calling in such amazing clients and repelled the ones I didn't want to work with. And it was such a weird, like, I just hadn't realized, which is hilarious as somebody who works in marketing, I just hadn't kind of clicked that also worked for me. And yeah, I don't know if anybody else has got a similar kind of story, but like that for me was just like, oh, you don't have to answer emails from dickheads at 4 a.m. in the morning because you actually don't align with their values. So bye-bye. Yeah, so I thought I'd share that a little bit.
I love it so much. And I will say, for the record, people who align with your values can also be dickheads. But but no, but I love that. And I have encountered the same exact thing where, and I actually have hanging from the back of my door right now. I just cleaned out my closet and I pulled out all of my old suits because I cannot think of any circumstance where I am going to need a dark taupe and highly tailored suit in my life anymore. I just like, that's not my version of professional anymore. And I'm calling in those people and I'm repelling the people who are not aligned with that. And it just feels so good to only work with people who give a shit about other people and who want to make a difference. And whether that difference is having a nonprofit that supports underprivileged youths, or if that difference is having your own business and making enough money and having enough profit to be able to sponsor your kid's soccer team. Like, whatever that difference is to you, and whatever, like, however that touches you and lights you up, having your own business and having the freedom to do that and to say those things and to have a fuck the Tories campaign and have it go viral and not lose your job for it because you are your job. That is one of the things that I love about having my own business and doing my own thing. It's just been so freeing.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree, but it is interesting because there is risk involved. I mentioned when I started my business, my most recent job was working for a real estate consulting company. Real estate agents are diverse. There's a ton real estate agents from all walks of life. However, that industry is dominated by rich white guys, and they are every bit the stereotype of like a salesperson, right? Like, what gives salespeople a bad name? And not all, and far and away, not all of them. There are so many, like millions of real estate agents who do not meet that criteria, but the ones that are kind of in positions of influence tend most often to meet that exact criteria. So I know a lot of them. And when I first started my business, there was a lot of opportunity to work with people who are that. But what that would mean is literally amplifying their voices and opinions. Like, that's literally my job. And I think like everyone on this conversation, we all kind of do that. Like, our job revolves around some kind of client work that amplifies that person's voice. So to your point, Siobhan, of like, you're working with them on something and then they start voicing their opinions and you're like holding your tongue. Like, is that what I want my business to look like? And as the political climate was becoming more and more heightened and divisive and dangerous, not that it hasn't always been dangerous in the US, the political climate has literally always been dangerous in the US, I acknowledge. But as things kind of heightened and we moved away from making progress against the danger and the harm, I was like, man, how do I how do I rectify within myself this concept that in my personal life, I'm doing all of this that I can to be involved in social justice movements and helping people, supporting people, protecting people, being the best possible ally I can be to people that I genuinely care about in my community. And yet I am amplifying voices that are harming those communities. Like, how do I do that? And my name is on it, right? My company name is on it. Like, how do I do that? So I had created a brand standards guideline statement form. It's essentially like something I have all of my clients like acknowledge when we start working together with a signature. The signature used to be something that I always collected. Now I just kind of recap it with clients. If I think there's a possibility for an issue, then I'll get a signature. But most of the time, I don't really have that anymore. But when I first started, my network was largely people that it might come up. Now it's not so much. I mean, I do this podcast. So like now most of the people in my world, it's not really a concern. But in this brand standard statement, I basically said, here's what we believe in. Here's what's important to us at Podfox. Here's how those core values show up. You don't have to agree with everything that we stand for. We don't have to vote the same way. However, if you are publicly using a platform, whether it's your podcast or another platform, to actively go against these core values or to spread hate speech or to cause harm to other groups of people, we reserve the right to immediately stop services. Like, so that's the best that I could come up with, is like, that gives me an out, right? Like, there was somebody who I was working with in the past who literally held a political fundraiser in his home for a candidate locally who I think is one of the most heinous people to run for office in the state of Arizona, maybe ever. And he was promoting it on social media. And like, it wasn't part of his podcast, but what do I do with that? What do I do with that? So this clause to me made me feel like this, at least I acknowledge with the person we both acknowledge before we start working together, like, hey, if that's what you're going to do, I'm going to stop working with you.
It's tough because we are all multifaceted creatures. And you mentioned, Sarah, you mentioned Apple iPhone at the beginning, and we have a really recent example. You've got Tim Cook at the inauguration sitting right there next to Sam Alt. I don't know who he's sitting next to, but sitting right there in the front row at the inauguration, and also giving the middle finger when they were told that they needed to roll back their DEI, and Apple said no. And yet Tim Cook personally gave $1 million to the inauguration fund. So we allow this nuance in the big brands that we support with our dollars. And it's easier, for me at least, to not allow that nuance in the small businesses that I work with. And I wonder why. What is that in my brain that it's okay for Apple, but not okay for my lawn guy who has a, oh gosh, what's the brand? Oh, Let's Go Brandon bumper sticker on the back of his car. Who I don't work with him anymore.
Honestly,
but
my 2 cents is it's options. It's that there's a lot of lawn guys you could work with. Like I said about real estate agents, there's a ton of real estate agents I can work with. But when it comes to phones, at least operating systems, like, for the most part, there are some others, but for the most part, it's like iOS or Android, right? Like, I mean, those are my choices.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Like, and all of my smartphone choices are created by corporations, and probably there were representatives from, I would guess, all of them, or at least umbrella corporation representation at the inauguration. Like, none of my choices are going to be purely good. And I do think is nuance for smaller business. Like, not all of us on this call would agree about every single thing, but I think that the nuance maybe looks bigger when you have less options.
I think
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
True. Also, Tim Cook is not iPhone as much as I am Jackie Hayes & Co., if that makes any sense. There is a board of directors who are making decisions for iPhone, for Target,
Okay.
etc. So one member of the board could be a dick, in our opinion, but it's not iPhone, as opposed to the real estate agent that Sarah may want to be working with. That is his business. He is his business. So That's the distinction for me anyways.
Well, I think that's such a good point because I'm thinking
Yep.
about too, a lot of people have moved away from using Amazon or any Amazon service, which of course is hard because turns out Amazon actually has a lot of services. They actually have their hands on a lot of things. But one of the things that's pretty obvious that most of us know is Amazon related is Kindle Unlimited, which if you didn't know, Kindle Unlimited is a subscription service through Amazon on their e-reader Kindle that you can have access to whatever authors have decided to put their books on KU. It's included in your membership. So you pay a low monthly subscription fee and you can read unlimited any of the books that are included without paying additional fees. And a lot of people have been like, oh, use Kindle Unlimited? I don't support Amazon. And so that's encouraged a lot of people online to cancel their Kindle Unlimited memberships to try to affect Amazon's bottom line. But the reality is that the people who are most directly affected by that are independent authors who have put their books on KU. And that's the only way they get paid is by people reading their books on KU. So by canceling your KU membership, the people who are affected are not Jeff Bezos. The people who are affected are the independent authors you actually want to support. Now, there's other ways you can support them. And that's what I've seen people saying is like, well, instead of paying KU once a month, I'm going to use that same dollar amount and I'm going to buy an independent author's book, like the actual physical book. You can make other choices. But at the end of the day, like, I think you're totally right, Jackie. And I used to say that about people boycotting Hobby Lobby back in the day when that was the thing to do here in the US was boycotting Hobby Lobby because they did not support like birth control options and maternity
I
leave.
still don't support Hobby Lobby.
I didn't shop at Hobby Lobby before the boycott, so it didn't change my shopping habits, but regardless, so it was very trendy to boycott. And I remember saying at the time, the person who's most directly affected by this is the cashier making minimum wage, who now no longer has a job because they don't need the cashiers, right? Like boycotts, I think, are like a slippery slope. We could have done a whole freaking podcast episode about boycotts, as it turns out. That was a lot of what we talked about. But I guess it's related because I think like, you know, what's interesting is a mission-driven brand by their core values is both the way we get people to want to work with us, and it's also the way we get certain people to boycott us. So it's a double-edged sword. The same people who don't want to shop at Target because they rolled back their DEI initiatives, the Target, for the same reason, is now a preferred shopping place for somebody who hates DEI. When Target, we'll use the same example. When Target was on the forefront, an industry leader for inclusive bathrooms, there were people who stopped shopping at Target for that reason, but there were just as many people who specifically shop at Target for that reason. So I think it is the double-edged sword of like, we're like, oh, we want to repel the suit wearing dickheads, but also we are talking about the brands we would boycott. So I think that really just captures a lot of it. So if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that the way I like to end these episodes is with the same question. I want to try to do that again, even though there's a bunch of us. So my question on this episode to end this episode is, it can be work related, but it does not have to be. What is one thing that is making you happy right now?
So I adopted 2 cats last July. They were feral before I got them. They lived on the streets for like year and a half. And one of them was very skittish, stayed away from me, wouldn't let me touch her until last week. She sought me out for pets and she's been seeking me out every day since. So it makes me super, super happy.
What are your cats' names? You can't say
Raven and Starfire. And yes, they are named after Teen Titan characters. They came with those names, but if you know me, they are perfect names. So
I love that. Cats, I don't have any at the moment. Things that make me happy are the longer days, the sun. The sun is finally here in the UK and it was light at like 5 o'clock, which is just glorious. I picked my son up from nursery and at 6 and he was like, I can see the sun. It's like, oh, amazing. Which it just feels really, I don't know, this winter has felt so long, probably because of the poly crisis, but also just general darkness. So yeah, light, sunshine is making me happy at the moment.
That's funny because I'm here in Florida in the Sunshine State. And the thing that's making me happy right now is it's been really rainy and dreary. So it's giving me an excuse to just like snuggle in with a good book and lay on the couch and read. I've been getting so much good reading done lately. And it's warming the cockles of my heart. On my Kindle, on my Amazon Kindle, getting all that reading in.
I love that. I would say for myself, it would just be the rock, which is my husband, my dog, my parents, my sister. They are what keep me together on even the hardest of days. So when I like start to feel in information overload or feel like what I'm doing is not enough, or like the world is too big for me to conquer it all, I always try to go back to them and be like, well, I have my family, I have my health, and I have to do what I have control over right now. And I'm thankful that they're around me. So that is what I always try to go back to.
Yeah. Okay, one thing that's making me happy, I mean, I led with this at the beginning of the podcast, so it's not like a surprise, but I'm so excited about this season. I think this was so fun. I feel like the one-on-one conversations for season 2 were really great, and I got a chance to have some really in-depth conversations on topics with people. But what I found myself thinking all through season 2 is I want to introduce them to each other. Like, and then I don't want them to go off and have a conversation without me. I want to be part of it. Like, I want to be in the room. And I feel like this is such a great way to be able to be part of these group conversations. I think, thank you so much for being willing to go here with me for the first time. And hopefully you will all be back again in the rest of the season. But I'm genuinely so excited about this. I think this podcast has been fun all along. Season 1 with Amanda was so fun to have like my business bestie in it with me. Season 2 was so fun because there was such a learning curve, right? I think those episodes just got better and better. And then right when I feel like I kind of mastered like every single conversation is a hit, like every single one is great, then I'm like, let's totally switch it up and do something different. But it's fun to kind of just pioneer something crazy. And yeah, the topics are exciting. The people are so exciting. You are exactly the type of people I want in my world and to call my friends and to do business with and to refer people to and vice versa. That's all I could possibly want. So I feel like I'm just so excited about the beginning this new chapter. So thanks for being here with me for it. And thank you for listening. And I'll see you next week. And maybe someone else on this call will also be here next week. Bye.